And so here comes a woman who's avoiding the crowd. It's the heat of day, right? And he asks her, "Can you give me some water?" Right?
Yeah.
He engages with her with a real need that he has, right? Gospel opportunities are always the most powerful when they just happen in everyday life.
That's right. That's right.
It's not me like, oh, let me go out with 20 tracks and let me just, start up some fake conversation so that I could twist it into the gospel, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, while you're on the bus, spark up a conversation with the person next to you.
What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture. Let's just get to it. The whole secular sacred divide. There is no distinction in the scriptures. Some of us have trust issues with God, and some of us, it's like, does God really got us? You can't engage the culture with the gospel that first has not engaged you. Like, you know how people are like, oh, that's just who I am. Nah.
Keep. Drop the mic. Drop the mic. Drop the mic.
Shaping the code. What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture podcast. Hope all is well with you all, family. Listen, y'all, we've got a special guest in the building today. It's taken some time to get him on the podcast. He's big time, too busy for me. I had to wake up at an ungodly hour just to get this man on the podcast.
Ebenezer, it's 9 a.m.
Listen, after the weekend we just had,
It was a good weekend.
It was a great weekend. Yeah, we're at Glory Conference, and Brian, Heidi, they came out, and it's been a beautiful time, and just so happy that you're here and that we're able to record this podcast. I've looked up to this man for a very long time. When I think about the kind of ministry I want to have, his life and his ministry is the model that I look to. And we have a lot of charismatic leaders, but not a lot of people that are actually walking the walk. And you, Brian, I feel like have been walking the walk for decades. And so thank you for your ministry, and thank you for saying yes to coming on Shape the Culture.
Oh, man, it's good to be here, man. Decades, though. You're making me sound real old, though.
Yeah. I've told you this. You age well for a white guy.
I try, man. I try to stay out the sun.
Yeah. That's the secret right there,
That's
right?
the secret.
Yeah. Well, for those who are living under a rock and may not know who you are, can you kind of just give a backstory, some context to who Brian Dye is?
Yeah, first of all, I've been married for 24 years to Heidi, my life partner, my greatest friend, my ministry partner, native of Chicago.
Yeah.
I'm representing the White Sox, even though we're going to beat the record of the most losses in a single season. But Chicago's my heart.
Great
Chicago's
city.
Home.
Yeah.
Born and raised there. And my life was transformed through godly mentors who invested in me in the midst of a family that wasn't ideal, a community that wasn't ideal, and mentored me in holistic ways, spiritually, emotionally, taught me how to work, so forth, helped me go to college. And so I've kind of committed my life to paying that forward, to paying that back. So my wife and I, no biological kids in 24 years of marriage, but we've always had an open house. So over 200 young people have lived with us. And then everything kind of flows out of that. So engaged in our community as deeply as we can. Started a conference in 2007 called the Legacy Conference with a heart to encourage, equip, empower everyday Christians to be disciples and make disciples. And so really, what does it look like if they, as a pastor, you know this, right? They say typically 20% of the people do 100%, 80% of the work, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Of the church. What would it look like to get 100% of our people engaged in the work of ministry? Not just on a Sunday service, but throughout the week, in the workplaces, in their communities, wherever they live and play.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's really dope because it seems like what was done for you, you now do for others. And what I love about what was done for you is that your discipleship was holistic. It wasn't just meeting the spiritual need, it was meeting the emotional, the mental, the physical. And I wanted to ask you, why is discipleship not just spiritual, but all the above? Like when I think about Jesus' ministry, he fed them before he preached to them. When someone was sick, he healed them. When someone was sick, or when someone was demon possessed, he delivered them. He wasn't just interested in preaching to them and giving them doctrine and theology, but he cared about the whole person.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes we miss out on the whole person in the church. Why do you think that is?
So when we look at Genesis 3, when the fall happens, Adam and Eve eat from the fruit, sin affects every area of our life, right? It's not just eternal separation from God. It's also enmity between each other. So brother would kill brother, right? Yeah. It's also work becomes hard. Childbearing becomes hard. Yeah. Every area of our life is affected. Yeah. And so if sin affects every area of our life, why do we think the gospel shouldn't affect every area of our life, right? Doesn't Christ come to reverse the curse? Doesn't he come to renew all things? And we know that in the future, in the new heavens and new earth, there will be no more enmity. There will be no more pain in childbirth, and murders and so forth. Yeah, it's good. And so, but Jesus' prayer is that the kingdom of God may be here on earth as it is in heaven, right? Yeah. But it's, to answer your question, it's easy to just share the gospel with somebody, and if they don't receive it, just walk off, or if they do receive it, okay, great, come to church with me now, and that's it. That's relatively easy. Yeah. But when someone is poor and homeless, right? It takes more than just one interaction, right? That's right. I mean, the idea of inviting someone to your home to have a meal, to maybe sleep in your spare bedroom, right? Yeah. That's like, that's too much right now, right? Yeah. So it takes more work, and we as humans don't like to work. Yeah, that's real. Right? Yeah, that's real. But as you alluded to, Jesus, Jesus did it all, right? Yeah. Obviously his ultimate goal is to go to the cross, right? To become the propitiation, the payment for our sins, to be buried, to rise again. Yeah. But he spent 33 years of his life walking with people, specifically 3 years, right, of his ministry years. Yeah. And he heals, right? And he preaches the gospel. He feeds, right? And he says even, what you do for the least of these, you've done for me. That's right. Good. He connects it with true gospel work. Yeah. And so I just can't see, like, if I truly care for you, then I'm going to care for the whole of you, the whole being that God created. That's right. Your emotions, your spiritual state, your physical state. Yeah, that's good. You said so many good things there, and I want to lean into the part where you talked about we don't like to work. And that's true. And I think sometimes too, I've heard people say work is a result of the fall, and it isn't. The sweat of the brow is the result of the fall, but work was there. Yeah. I mean, God gave Adam the command to name the animals and so on and so forth. And so I want to ask you, what does it look like for the Christian to lean into the hard things? Because I have learned the older I've gotten that a lot of what God calls us to isn't convenient. It isn't comfortable. It's going to be costly. And Jesus says, pick up your cross daily. So it's like, even if I pick up my cross yesterday, I got to wake up today and do it all over again. Yeah. And I think that that's what drives ministry. But why do you think we have a hard time picking up the cross when it comes to serving our neighbor? Yeah, I mean, we all want beach bodies. I want a beach body, right? But I don't like the work to get that beach body, right? Yeah. And so I'll eat a honey bun, and I'll, we're in Minneapolis, Juicy Lucy burger, right, and so forth. And but every good thing comes as a result of work, right? Yeah. The farmer doesn't get the harvest unless he or she tills the ground, that's right. Plants the seed, so forth, right? Yeah. A marriage isn't successful, doesn't flourish unless there's effort, work put into it. Yeah. And so we all want the results. We all want to be rich. Yeah. We all want great marriages. Yeah. We all want perfect bodies, right?
Yeah.
But most of us don't have any of that because, again, the work that goes into it, right? And you make a great point that God caused us to work before the fall happened, right? The result of the fall is that work now will be hard, right? But work is not bad. Work is good, right? And so what does it look like to truly put in the work to get the fruit, to get the beauty, to get the results, right? If a miner wants to mine for gold, gold isn't sitting on the surface of the ground, right? It's deep down. You gotta do the digging of it.
That's good. Yeah, I love that. I want to ask you, because as I watch your life and Heidi's life, I feel like you guys have consistently chosen the hard thing. How do you do that? Like, for those who don't know, they live on the west side of Chicago, and I don't like going over to the west side of Chicago. I grew up in the suburbs, and so whenever I'm at the house, my heart is beating a little too fast. So, but not just the area you live in, but the life that you live, being hospitable, opening up your home and having people live with you guys, and then disciple. I mean, it's one thing to just preach sermons, but to actually be walking with people. And I've seen you guys time and time again choose the hard thing. How do you guys go about that? Like, what's the secret for y'all?
Yeah. First of all, I will say, not every believer is called to the hood, right?
Yeah.
So this is not about, choose the hardest thing and just do it, right?
That's good.
I grew up in the hood. I felt called to stay in the hood. Some people leave the hood, that's fine, right? As long if it's God that's leading. But, why put in the work to the hard things, right? Again, that's going to look different for everybody. Some people, it's in the suburban context. Like, I wouldn't know what to do in the suburbs. Like, it's too quiet. It's like, like there's some creeper hiding behind a bush and stuff,
Different problems.
It's different problems, right? Some contexts we just hide it better, right? And some contexts is out in the open. But again, it's man, at work, right? We just want to go in, do our clock in, clock out, 9 to 5, so forth. Don't interact with anybody. Don't go above and beyond what you have to do, right? But God calls us to be salt and light wherever we are, right? So what does it look like to be at the workplace on mission for God? Yes, do your work well, right? That's part of glorifying God. Do it with integrity, bring good out of whatever workplace that is. But at the same time, like, man, how can I treat a coworker to lunch, pay for their lunch,
That's right.
And I'm an introvert. You're an introvert as well. I feel like most pastors are. But, during lunch break, I just want to chill. I want to stay to myself, so forth.
Don't talk to me.
But again, it's the dying, right? Dying to yourself. And unless the seed falls to the ground and dies, it doesn't bear fruit.
That's good.
And so, again, if I want to see lives change at work, then I have to do the work that it takes to see that, right? To bear that fruit. And so, again, paying for someone's lunch, taking my time, to have conversations, to listen to them, right, as they share their marriage struggles, right, and pray for opportunities to bring the gospel into that. Our free time after work, right? What are we doing with our, we typically 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, right? And you have 8 hours of flex time, right? Am I just going to sit in front of a TV and just watch TV the whole day, right? Not that, again, TV is necessarily wrong, but Paul says in 1 Timothy, a good soldier does not get entangled in civilian affairs.
That's right. That's good.
He wants to please his commanding officer. So a lot of times as Christians, I feel like we avoid the sin, the outright sin, right? But we're not really working to do good, And so, stop doing X, Y, and Z, but start doing A, B, C, right? And so, what does it look like to, if I'm going to go grocery shopping, right, to invite somebody with me, right? If I'm going to the gym, to be intentional while I'm there, right?
That's good.
Or bring somebody with me. And again, yes, it it takes time, it takes effort. Sometimes I don't feel like I'll know the answers that they might ask, but that deepens my faith.
That's
now,
good.
right?
Yeah.
Because they're asking me questions. I'm like, man, I honestly don't know the answer to that, but I'm gonna search. I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna research. Right? And next week when we get together, I'll try to have an answer for you.
That's
right?
good.
And now it's forcing me to pray.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It's forcing me to labor. God, save my friend.
Yeah.
God, do a work in his marriage, her marriage.
Yeah.
So it not only bears fruit in the other individual, but it bears fruit in my own life.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah. I love that. So much to unpack from that. I often hear people say, I can't make disciples, or I can't preach the gospel, I can't evangelize because I'm new to the faith, or I don't know a lot yet, or I'm not a seminary student. I think about Mark chapter 5, the man that was demon possessed, like with legions. Jesus goes into Decapolis. It's a, Gentile area, and he delivers this man who's demon possessed, and he's free and he's happy, and all he wants to do is go back with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says, nah, homie, you got to stay right there and tell people what I've done for you. Fast forward 2 chapters, Mark chapter 7, when Jesus comes back to the area of Decapolis, there's all these different people who are now hungry for God. What I failed to mention is in Mark chapter 5, one of the reasons why Jesus left is because people in the city kicked him out. They were like, we don't want you to be here. Yeah. The difference between Mark chapter 5 and Mark chapter 7 was this man's testimony. He didn't have a theological seminary background. He wasn't one of the disciples. He wasn't getting the inside scoop on the parables that Jesus was giving like the rest of the 12 were. But him just sharing what Jesus had done for him created a breeding ground of anticipation and expectation and a hunger and desperation for Jesus the next time he came around. And so can you speak to the importance of just this idea that all you have is all you need, that sure, we're going to get better with time. Sure, we need to study. Sure, we need to be prayed up. But at the same time, God has already entrusted so much in us. And if we just exercise that or work that out, we would be surprised at what God could do with that.
Yeah. Similar story with the woman at the well, right? In John 4, she immediately leaves her water jug, right? And goes and tells everyone in the village what the Lord had done for her. Yeah. And so it's not just that they shared their testimony, but they lived their testimony as well, right? Yeah. I mean, imagine, there's this crazy man who lives in the tomb, amongst the tombs, right? Who breaks the chains, who tries to cut himself, right? He's going through so much pain. Yeah. And a lot of times I think of, so I think we could either over spiritualize demonic activity, right? And there's a demon behind everything. But at the same times we could often in today's society over analyze, like, oh, there's a mental disease or whatever, right? And I think so often it's a mix of both. The devil and his demons play with our mind. That's all the power he has, right? To get us to believe lies about ourselves and about others. So here's an individual, whatever happened to this individual, right? Whether they were abandoned by their parents and that led him down this path, whether, his wife and kids were killed, by the Roman soldiers. Like, I mean, who knows what trauma this individual went through.
That's right.
But something, because of the result of the fall, because of the result of sin, right, tormented this individual to the point where his friends, his family, his society didn't know what to do for him anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he lives amongst the tombs. It has a picture of, I wish I was dead.
Yeah, that's
right.
Good. Yeah.
And literally he's cutting himself. He's self-harming himself. Right. So we don't think about like what led him to that point. We just, he's demon possessed. Like demons just jumped on him one day out of nowhere. Right. It's like, no, his life was opened up to that activity. Right. And so now you see this man, right? You're used to avoiding him. You're used to looking another way. You're used to ignoring his cries coming from the tombs. And now you see him in his right mind.
Yeah.
And now he says, hey, check it out, you know?
Yeah.
And you're trying to run, and he's like, no, let me tell you about what happened to me, right? You can't ignore
That's right.
the power of that testimony.
That's right.
Right?
That's good.
Not just what he says, but who he is now, right?
Yeah.
His life is transformed. He's been set free from the demons that held him bondage, right?
Yeah.
He's been free from the desire to kill himself. He's been free from the desire to avoid society, right?
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That's right.
And we miss out on that, you know, when we don't, you know, the danger of becoming a Christian is we cut off all of our unbelieving friends, right? And there's definitely, we need community to grow, to push ourselves, right, to learn, to stretch, and so forth, right? But at the same time, God has us in the earth, right?
That's right.
I like in Ephesians 1, Paul's writing to the saints who are in Ephesus, right?
Yeah.
You're a saint, you're set apart, but you're in Ephesus.
That's good.
You're in a wicked city. You're in a wicked world, right? And so what does it look like to let our lives shine forth brightly, right?
Yeah.
Light, if we just add light to a lit room, what's the point of it, right?
Right, that's good.
The point of a light is to be lit in a dark space, right? To give sight. So again, man, if all I know is John 3:16, share John 3:16 to everyone you meet.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And then as you grow, you'll add more verses, more scriptures, right, to it. So it's not like don't stop growing. It's like, no, grow, but share as you grow, as you go, right?
Yeah. I love that. What does it look like to be in the world but not of the world? Because you talk about being a city on a hill, showing you can't be a light in the light. You got to be a light in the darkness. I think about Jesus' priestly prayer in John 17, where he prays to the Father that he would keep them, that he would keep his disciples on the earth. Or even the Mount Transfiguration, when Peter, James, and John go up with Jesus and they see him in a whole new light. And I mean, it's a glorious moment. And Peter's like, can we just set up tent here and just, I like this. This is beautiful. And Jesus is like, no, we got to go back down, back to culture, back to society, back to the world. And so, because I grew up in a cultural context where everything in the world was evil, therefore avoid it at all costs. And I think there's wisdom to that. But I also do see that we are called to the dark places. When Jesus, I remember this message like it was yesterday. We had the privilege of having you the weekend we planted Perazim Church, and you spoke at our Glory Conference that year, and you talked about the passage where Jesus brings his disciples to Caesarea Philippi, and in that place he says, I will build my church. But the geographical context is significant to that moment because he's bringing them to a very scary place, a Gentile place. He takes them to the darkest place and says, I'm going to build my church right here. And so you see in Jesus' ministry, you see in Jesus' life, and you see even in his prayers and his commands that we're called to culture. Why do you think we've lost a sense of that?
Yeah, even going back to Caesarea Philippi, just to add more context, Caesarea Philippi was the northern extent of the Israel, right? Yeah. And the Roman occupiers created this town called Caesarea Philippi in honor of Caesar, who they thought was God, and then Herod Philip. They named it in honor of those two, right? Yeah. And there's this big mountain that had temples in it, right? And so there was a temple to Zeus, the Greek god. There was a temple to Pan, the god Pan, which is in Greek mythology is like half goat, half human, right? God of terror. God of terror, right? Panic. We get the word panic from Pan. And so, and they would do like all kinds of orgies with goats, with humans, right? To get the attention of this god Pan. So you can imagine like the Jewish parents, the religious parents were like, don't you ever go there, right? You stay away from there, right? There's about a 30-mile walk from Galilee, like where Jesus was raised up, Nazareth and so forth. And so one day Jesus is like, hey guys, we're taking a walk. and usually they will go south towards Jerusalem, but now they go north, and
Yeah.
and the disciples, you got to imagine, are like, where is he taking us, right?
Yeah.
And then you come to this mountain, and you see the idolatry, you see the false worship and so forth going on, and it's exactly there where Peter first acknowledges who Jesus is. You are the Christ,
Yeah.
the Son of the living God.
Yeah.
And what's significant about two things he says there: living God, not these dead gods, right?
That's good.
So we often, when you go buy jewelry,
Yeah.
they take a diamond, put it against a black cloth,
Yeah.
right? So that you could see the contrast and comparison,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so we don't understand who God really is, that he's the living God, the powerful one,
Yeah.
until we experience the brokenness of this world,
Yeah.
this world's gods,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we think this money, this bank account is gonna make me happy, and we realize it doesn't.
Yeah.
We think this relationship's gonna make me happy, give me joy, and we realize it doesn't,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when we're in the midst of a brokenness, right, as opposed to avoiding it, we get to see God in comparison to
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then also the other title that he gives is the Christ. And we I don't think we pay attention to that enough. But the idea of Christ is the Greek way of saying Messiah, the Hebrew way of saying it. But it's the same idea. And again, the curse of sin has affected every area of our life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Again, fathers and sons, the relationships are screwed over, marriages, brother, so forth, right? Kingdom wages war against kingdom. There's famine, everything, right?
Yeah.
Because sin enters the world.
Yeah.
And the throughout the what we call the Old Testament, but the people of God would read those scriptures, and they would see promises of this Christ or this Messiah that would come to reverse the curse,
Yeah.
to bring back the kingdom here on earth, right?
Yeah.
And so when we say Jesus Christ, right, it should remind us that Jesus means the one who saves,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But Christ is the one who redeems or restores, right?
That's good.
And so, yes, he is the one who calls us to trust in him, but he's also the one who says, I'm going to restore your marriage. I'm going to restore your relationship with your father. I'm going to restore the brokenness of this world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's again beauty in that, right?
yeah.
And I totally forget what question you asked me now.
No, it's
I just
good.
kind of started going.
No, I love it. Yeah, we were just talking about being in the culture and letting Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we call ourselves Christians,
Yeah.
we're literally saying we're little Christ.
Yeah. Come on now. Yeah.
So what is my role here on earth?
Yeah. Redeeming.
Redeeming,
good.
restoring
Yeah.
brokenness,
Yeah.
wherever it is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And again, there's brokenness everywhere, not just in the hood,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's brokenness in the suburban context. There's
Yeah.
brokenness in media. There's brokenness in our medical
Yeah.
system, right?
Yeah.
In our education system,
Yeah.
in our political system,
Yeah.
right? Brokenness is everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
And so what does it look like to be a little Christian, a little Christ, right?
Yeah.
Who restores the brokenness in
good.
whatever sphere of influence I'm in.
That's good. I think this is such an important conversation because growing up, I was taught to pick a major and a career based on what paid well, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You got to eat, you got to pay your bills. But especially in the Ethiopian context, we had three options. Either you're a lawyer, engineer, or doctor, because those roles are prestigious and they pay the big bucks. But I never thought about picking a career with this in mind. Like, where can I bring God's redemption power? What space can I occupy that I could help restore? What does it look like to think about where we are? Maybe now we're already in our careers, or we're already married, or whatever it is. We're settled in the city that we live in. How can we start reframing how we see our jobs, reframing how we see our communities, reframing how we start seeing our neighborhoods, so that we don't just look at it from a place of, oh, this is how I make my money and this is just life, but my presence matters, and what I do here can bring heaven down.
Yeah, I think a good question for all Christians to ask is, in our workplace, where's the brokenness in my workplace? In my community, where's the brokenness in my community?
Yeah,
Right? In my family, where's the brokenness in my family? and how has God called me to bring beauty out of that, right?
Yeah.
To bring restoration out of that.
Yeah.
So a nurse, right? Let's say someone's a nurse. Nurses are often stretched thin, right?
Yeah.
They have such a huge client
Yeah.
caseload and so forth. So they could easily jump from patient to patient,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But what does it look like for a nurse to slow down and remember their patient's name,
Yeah,
right?
that's good.
To look them in the eye,
That's good.
to ask them how their family is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Here's someone who might be dying, right, of cancer or whatever,
Yeah.
and you might be the last person this person ever talks to, right? So
Yeah.
what does it look like to bring healing in that moment?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
to give grace in that moment.
Yeah.
A teacher, right? You got a class of 30 kids, and 5 of them are a headache. You know, what does it look like, instead of just like ignoring them for the other 25, but spend time with them outside the classroom.
Yeah.
Go visit their home.
Yeah.
Engage their family.
Yeah.
Take them to a meal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Take them out. Right.
Yeah, get some ice cream.
Get
Yeah.
some ice cream, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Build a relationship, build trust in
Yeah.
that situation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Find out why they're acting up, right?
Right.
Because oftentimes we look at we look at the action that they're doing, but we don't ask the root questions, right?
Right. Right.
Why are you this way?
Yeah.
What happened to you?
That's good.
right?
That's good.
And so again, in every area, right? If it's the arts, right? How can I bring glory to God through music,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that music isn't all around sex, murder, so forth, money,
Yeah.
But I point people to the God of beauty.
That's right. That's good.
And so again, where's brokenness
Yeah.
in my sphere of influence?
Yeah.
And then how is God calling me with my resources, with my time, with my treasures, right? To bring beauty out of that, restoration out of that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. I, when you're speaking, I can't help but think about this idea that the little things go a long way. Looking at them in the eyes, remembering their name, giving an encouragement, buying them some ice cream. That's something that doesn't take too much time, too much sacrifice. And I think sometimes when we think about being a disciple of Jesus who goes and makes disciples, we think that we have to put our life on pause in order to engage in his mission. I even think about what Jesus says when he says, go and make disciples. That phrase right there is better understood as you go.
Yeah.
Meaning you don't put your life on pause to make disciples. It's as you go to the gym, as you go to work, as you're getting engaged, as you're getting your master's. Like, ministry isn't, let me stop my life and then give you 2 hours at Starbucks and just download these beautiful insights into your soul and then go about. No, it's like, as you're clocking in at work, looking at somebody in the eyes. I'm terrible. I'm good at remembering faces, but I'm terrible at remembering names. But what does it look like to just intentionally remember somebody's name as a form of ministry? What does it look like to redefine what disciple making? I mean, I think there's a misconception that discipleship is a lot harder than it really is.
Obviously, there's always going to be the vocational ministers, right?
Yes.
The full-time pastor, the full-time missionary who goes overseas and so forth. But that's less than 1%, right, of all Christians.
Yeah.
And so 99% of us, most of us, are going to be everyday Christians.
Yes.
And I think we forget, when you look at the New Testament, right, there's 27 books, right? 13 of them, right, were written by one individual. Half of them were written by one man, Paul.
Yeah.
Many of the early churches were planted by Paul, right? Paul was an amazing missionary who would go share the gospel, raise people up, so forth. We forget, though, that he was a tent maker. Like he was an entrepreneur. He was a business person, right? Yeah. Wherever he went, he would make tents and sell them to provide for his needs. And so, and he ministers to an individual by the name of Luke, who wrote 2 books of our New Testament, the Gospel of Luke, the book of Acts, right? Yeah. Which in word count is more than all Paul's 13 letters, right? He was a doctor, a physician, right?
Yeah.
Yet he writes, the book that is read at Christmas time about the Christmas story.
Yeah.
We turn to Luke,
Yeah,
right? He
yeah.
knows all the details of Christ's birth,
Yeah.
because he wasn't an eyewitness of it,
Right.
but he met people who
Yeah.
were eyewitnesses
Yeah,
of it,
yeah.
and he passes it on,
Yeah.
right? And so again, you have a tent maker, you have a doctor, right, who were two of the greatest authors of the New Testament.
Yeah.
Who made a huge impact,
That's good.
right?
That's so good.
On millions, if not billions, of people throughout history.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, they were everyday Christians, right? And so yes, God's going to call some to be vocational, full time, so forth, but that doesn't free the rest of us from the responsibility
Yeah.
of making disciples.
Yeah.
And so again, as you said, as you go,
Yeah. Yeah.
make
yeah.
disciples. Jesus, he went to the well. Why did he go to the well in John 4?
Thirsty.
He was thirsty.
Yeah.
He wasn't going there necessarily just so he could make up a gospel opportunity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
He went there because he was thirsty.
Yeah.
His disciples went into town, right? And he has no well to get water from the well.
Yeah.
No jar, right, to get water from the well. And so here comes a woman who's avoiding the crowd. It's the heat of day, right? And he asks her, "Can you give me some water?" Right?
Yeah.
He engages with her with a real need that he has, right? Gospel opportunities are always the most powerful when they just happen in everyday life.
That's right. That's right.
It's not me like, oh, let me go out with 20 tracks and let me just, start up some fake conversation so that I could twist it into the gospel,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like, no, while you're on the bus, spark up a conversation with the person next to you.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
As you're at a restaurant, talk to the person, behind you.
Yeah.
Maybe offer to pay their meal,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
As you're at the gym, right?
Yeah.
You need someone to spot you.
Yeah, yeah,
Ask a stranger, hey, can you spot me? I'll spot you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then that just leads into regular conversation, right?
Right.
And if the word of God is out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks,
That's right. That's right.
So if I'm meditating on the word of God, it's going to come out
Yeah.
eventually in regular conversation.
Yeah.
I don't have to force it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just going to come.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's, ministry is not, a Saturday night at a conference at the big altar call, and I think it was Francis Chan who said, a lot of how we do discipleship now is we invite people to church. But when you look at the way Jesus calls us to do it, he never tells his disciples, invite people to church. He says, go and make disciples. Yeah. So you be the church out there. You don't bring people in here, and that is a byproduct. I don't want to, and please bring friends to church. But I think sometimes that we rely heavily on that and underestimate the power of what it looks like to ask somebody to spot us at the gym. Yeah. As we're kind of thinking about all this, and as we look at our cultural landscape and the faith, and I mean, there's so much going on. I wanted to ask you, what's something that's burning on your heart right now? What's something that you're burdened by? Something you're praying about? Something that you're leaning into? What's been going on in your mind and heart as you're unpacking and moving into ministry?
Yeah, man. Not as young as I used to be, but Heidi and I we got to know each other doing youth ministry, and no matter how much we've tried to get out of it, God has always kept us in it. Right. So we always have teenagers, young people in our lives, just through normal everyday experiences. And the Barna research, the church research will all say that young people are leaving the church. Yeah. They're not interested in God, so forth. It's like this, they're not going to come to Christ. Yeah. Hopelessness, right? And what I really feel is that what God's doing through this is He's bringing the church back to what the church was supposed to be.
That's good.
And I think through COVID, this was God trying to do it as well, right? Yeah. How can you do church without a Sunday gathering? And many churches fought like, oh, you can't tell us stop doing church. It's like, but God didn't even tell you to do church like that, you know?
That's good.
Again, not that it's bad to do a Sunday gathering, worship service, everything, right? But the early believers met in homes, right? They met in homes day by day, not just once a week either.
Right.
They broke bread. They had meals together. When someone was in need, they sold their possessions to give to those in need. Why? Because they knew them.
Yeah.
They shared meals together.
Yeah.
It wasn't just some name who sits 5 rows before me in service.
Right.
It was someone that we've done life together, right?
Yeah.
So young people, I think are again God's way of reminding the church, hey, it's not about the Sunday service.
Yeah.
That's not what defines church.
Right.
Again, it could be a piece, but it shouldn't be the end all. What people really want, they want a place of belonging.
That's good.
Right? They want to know their identity, and they want a purpose. Right?
Yeah.
That I think throughout history has been the case. Right?
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah.
What am I here for?
Yeah.
Who are my tribe?
Yeah.
Who are my people?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what young people want.
Yeah.
Right? Man, if I think I'm gonna give the best sermon, I'm gonna be the best preacher, I'm gonna have the best worship team at my service, right? Dude, how are you gonna compete against what young people are carrying on their phone? You know? They have all the entertainment. If they want preaching, they have the best preaching.
Yeah.
You know, so unless you're the absolute best,
Yeah.
there's others that they could access on their phone.
Yeah.
They have all the worship that they would ever want downloaded from their phone.
good.
Why do they need to get out of bed to come to your Sunday service?
Yeah.
Right.
That's good.
But what they can't get on their phone is again a place of belonging.
That's good.
Right?
That's good.
That's why this generation is so lonely.
Yeah.
Suicide rates are going high,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Depression,
Yeah.
all this, right? Is because on their phone, even though they're connected with more people than we've ever were 20 years ago, right? There's no depth of the relationship. And so they want to know, when I'm not just showing my best on Instagram,
Yep.
do people really care who
Yep.
I am?
Yep. Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
Again, they want to know, man, who am I
Yeah.
at the end of the day?
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, man, I see all the brokenness in this world. What are we doing about it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What are we doing to solve the issues,
Yeah.
to address the issues?
Yeah.
And I think if the church would again waken up
Yeah.
to what people really long for,
Yeah.
and what the church is meant to be the answer for,
Yeah.
we're gonna see young people come to Christ like crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
That's good.
But if we keep holding on to the past, we're gonna die.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, we're seeing God work in Chicago, and young people they're working with just this summer, young man comes to Christ, right? Not by coming to a service, but by coming into our house.
That's good.
By following us, by watching us for years,
Yeah.
and God's doing a work in other young people as well.
Yeah.
Again, because we're offering them what they're longing for,
Right.
what their human need desires.
Right. No, that's powerful. You can't compete with the best, but you can love like Jesus.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And I think, we crave intimacy, we crave community. And I always say to people, it's within our DNA. When God made Adam, he said, let us make man in our image. That's plural, because God within himself is a community.
Yeah.
And so if God is living in community, what makes us think that we shouldn't or we're not supposed to?
Yeah.
And so that's powerful. And I think that's a message that isn't just for young people, but for all people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking about this with my church planting coach, but we're living in a day where you sit on YouTube and watch people react to songs and react to movies. And there was a time where you just reacted with your friends.
Yeah.
You didn't go on a YouTube platform and watch a stranger. And so I think it's fun. It's entertaining. I'm not critiquing it, but it's kind of weird.
It's again, they're watching it because that's what they're longing for.
Yeah, exactly. They want to laugh with somebody.
They want to laugh
enjoy
with
something
somebody.
with someone. Yeah.
Yeah, they want to experience life with somebody.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. So there's this void. And I think that if the church steps into that, I think we would see revival. That's good. I always love chatting with you, talking with you. This was an edifying conversation, but I wanted to give you the last say. If you have any last thoughts or any encouragement you want to give for the person tuning in that's been a follower for some time, or maybe that's new to the faith, like, what would be your encouragement to them?
Yeah. Man, I would just say, I mean, the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. What does it look like to pursue God in a way that he deserves? What is it like to truly love him? Because he's the only one who will never abandon us. He's the only one who will never ignore us, avoid us, run off, leave us. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Right? Everything you have, you know, your pocketbook, your schedule, your calendar, right? But then the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself.
That's good.
Right? And the reason why love the Lord your God is first and foremost is because without that we can't do the second. Right. But we should never do, if we do the first, the second should be the overflow.
That's good.
It should be the response, right? As I fill my cup up with God's love, you know, it's going to overflow into other relationships, right? So Jesus says it another way: be connected to the vine, right? You know, Psalms 1 talks about, you know, a tree planted by streams of living water, right? And so the more we connect to God, right, on a regular basis, again, not it's great hearing a Sunday sermon. It's great listening to a podcast, you know, so forth. But what does it look like for me to get in God's face, right? To hear from him, to spend time with him, to let him encourage me, build me, challenge me, you know, rebuke me when I need to be rebuked. And then live in response to that, right? What does it look like to love somebody in the way that God loves me?
That's good.
To not love somebody who could do something for me, because that's not the way God loves.
That's
right?
That's good, man.
But love somebody who can't do nothing for me.
That's so good.
To love that awkward person at our church. To love the homeless person who can't pay you back, right? To love, again, that bad kid in your classroom, right? To love that neighbor who, you know, gets on your last nerve.
That's right.
That's the type of love that transforms the world. That's the type of love that transforms us. Right? When we're loved like that by God and by others.
That's powerful. That's such a good encouragement. I always think the way we obey the first command is by obeying the second command. I think about John, who says, how can you claim to love a God who's invisible if you don't love your brother who is visible? And so the way we love God is by loving our neighbors. And so, no, that's powerful. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I hope we don't have to wait another 5-6 years to get you back on the podcast.
You just let me know, man.
Make me wake up at ungodly time to make it happen. No, I'm just kidding. But I so appreciate you. I respect you so much. And thank you for all that you do. Thank you for what you're about. I know that Chicago is better because of your presence and your ministry. I know I'm better because of your presence and your ministry. And so I pray to God that we could follow your lead and follow your example, because you've set a very high standard. And so thank you for just not talking good and spewing wisdom, but also living that life. We really appreciate you, Brian.
Thank you for that.
And until next time, family, peace and grace.